Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host, here with Beatrice. We're in Patterson, California. Dropped a load over in Turlock. I came over here just to get a shower. We were kind of camping last night. We stayed up in Donner Summit. And that thumbnail on the video is B and I were hiking on the Pacific Crest Trail. I don't know how far we went, doesn't really matter, but it was interesting and it was kind of fun because I had never hiked on that trail before. And I will tell you, if you like hiking, it is great exercise, of course. The trail runs very close to both the westbound and eastbound rest areas on I-80 at the Donner Summit. So if it just happens to be that you could stop up there and you want to go hiking, you know, it's very accessible. It was kind of interesting because I've hiked on the Appalachian Trail a bunch of times, and you know, a lot of miles over the years, certainly, and mostly in the Mid-Atlantic, so Virginia, Maryland, you know, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, those areas. But you know, it seems like the Pacific Crest Trail is it's a different animal. It's hiking is hiking, but it's a lot of the PCT is at a higher altitude than you're going to get on the East Coast. Like the highest point on the AT, I think, is Clingman's Dome, which is down in Tennessee, and that's like 6,800 feet. To just give you an idea, like Donner Summit, I think, is around 8,000 feet, and so like we headed north up the trail and it climbed from there. So higher altitude, drier conditions. In fact, I met a lady who was she wasn't through hiking, she was just doing 500 miles. And she said she tried to through hike last year and couldn't because of wildfires. So you got more altitude, drier conditions, and it seemed like where we were, there were plenty of trees, but even with plenty of trees, they're coniferous trees instead of deciduous trees, so there's a lot more light on you, a lot more sunlight. So those are some things I noticed that were different, but we still had a good time. And fortunately, because of all the snowpack from last winter, the streams along the trail are running pretty good, and so I brought water and stuff so B and I would have something to drink, but B was able to drink out of a couple of different streams that we crossed, both going out and coming back to the truck. So it was a good experience. I'm not going to do history per se, but you know, like I always say, what happened yesterday is history today. And a couple of historic things have happened and just broke in the news today. The first one I want to mention is about the Navy. Admiral Lisa Franchetti was sworn in as the Chief of Naval Operations today. She is the first woman to be the highest ranking member of an armed force. So I'm pleased that the Navy, you know, took the lead on that. And I want to say something because I'm going to hear, I may not, but there are going to be these people that talk about, you know, oh, it's affirmative action or it's wokeness or some other bullshit, right? But let me tell you something about the military. I've worked for a few people that were, you know, ended up being 4-star admirals. And I've even worked for a couple of guys. In fact, one of the people that wrote one of my recommendations for law school Admiral Gary Roughhead ended up being the chief of naval operations. So I've known a bunch of very senior officers during my career in the Navy. A lot of people that were 4-stars. And I can tell you no one, and Admiral Franchetti was the vice chief of naval operations, so she was second in command in the Navy, but no one gets to that level. I don't care how, I don't care what anybody says, no one gets to that level without being really good at what they do. I can tell you without even reading her biography, she was a shit-hot naval officer right from Jump Street. When she was an ensign, she was better than the other ensigns. When she was a lieutenant, she was better than the other lieutenants. When she was a commander, she was better than the other commanders, okay? She has served as an XO, and I haven't read her bio, but I guarantee she served as an executive officer and a commanding officer of an operational command. She's been impressive her whole career, so she is well qualified to be the chief of naval operations. The other thing I will say is the DOD is a good old boys club, and it probably always will be, but kudos to the president for picking her. And the thing is, right, like, she wasn't the recommendation of the SecDef, but who himself is a retired 4-star. But excuse me. But here's the thing: there's whoever I can't even remember who they recommended, but it doesn't really matter, right? But that other person who was a man is not better qualified than her. I'm just gonna say that. People might have liked him or known him better, but he's not more qualified than her. Okay? Otherwise, she wouldn't have been the vice chairman, or excuse me, the vice chief of naval operations. So anyway, that's historic. There's another historic thing that's happened today. There was a decision handed down in Montana where a group of kids were basically the plaintiffs suing the state of Montana for implementing laws that were contrary to the Montana Constitution. And in particular, what this decision is about is that the state and the legislature, so there's a Republican supermajority legislature who basically gutted an act that was designed to protect the environment and said that you didn't necessarily need to have environmental impact information before you approve permitting for mining and also this other plant that was going to burn methane gas. That, by the way, that plant licensure had been enjoined by another judge, and then the legislature came along and passed a law to basically hook up the company that was going to burn this methane gas without any considerations of environmental impact. Well, it turns out, though, that the Montana Constitution, which has only been in effect since like 1972, says that everything has to take into account protecting the environment and the health and welfare of the citizens. And so under that kind of health and welfare of the citizens clause, these kids ages 5 to 22, who were the plaintiffs, they sued the state. Now the state says they're going to appeal, but it's a rather momentous decision, because this is the first time that really anywhere where the government has been held accountable for not protecting the environment, so to speak, by passing laws that are not going to, that are designed to circumvent good environmental practices. So it's pretty cool. We'll see what happens, but I thought that was historic. The decision, by the way, I believe the caption is Held, H-E-L-D, versus Montana. So I I read an article in the Daily Montanan, which is obviously a state, based newspaper up in Montana, but there's also a story I just noticed in the Washington Post. So let's talk about some trucking stuff now. A couple of trucking things. I cannot recall the last time I had a trailer, and I've talked about trailer maintenance on a number of occasions, but right now I am on a losing streak when it comes to trailers that's got to be like a month old, like where I haven't had one trailer on my back that didn't have some kind of problems that I had to deal with, or that I had to deal with, whether it was constant alarms, whether it was everything from the air system to the reefer. I had to deal with it, meaning I had to keep checking it over and over and over again outside the normal checks that I do when I stop in my pre-trips. But also I've spent easily an entire work day over the last month just sitting waiting for trailers to get, actually more than that. I'm going to say it's probably at this point, at least over the last month, at least 3 drive shifts. So drive shifts 11 hours, so 33 hours, certainly 30 hours. And it happened again today. So and here's the thing, I got it. So I had a trailer that I went to Salt Lake City with. It had all sorts of issues, and it needed to go in the shop. It had issues with the tire pressure or the air system on the trailer. And when you get a trailer attached to you, you can pull it up and see when it's due for maintenance or stuff like that. And the top 2 categories were way in the red, like it was way overdue for inspections and stuff. And I talked to somebody recently. They got hooked a trailer that hadn't been, had a DOT inspection. It was out of periodicity, and they had to go get that taken care of. But I think it behooves the drivers, when you get a trailer, to really dig in on what's going on with these trailers, because a lot of these trailers have deferred maintenance, have inspections that haven't been done, and if a ticket gets issued, it's not being issued to somebody who didn't do their job at a shop. It's going to be issued against you, right? And and I spoke about the intersection between safety, meaning CSA scores, and maintenance. And so I pull into I delivered my load in Salt Lake City. I take the trailer to the shop. I told them up front, I said, this trailer needs to be worked on. The next day, I get a load, and I need an empty. And I was like 10th in line for a roadworthy empty trailer, okay? No one even answered the phone in the trailer shop at night when I was trying to call. I called like 4 times, nobody answered. The next morning, nobody, even though it says they're supposed to be there from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., nobody was in driver lineup. I have to walk over to the shop, and I'm not complaining about walking somewhere. I like the exercise. But my point is that the system isn't really working the way I think that Prime management intends for it to work. So I go over there, they're like, yeah, you're like 10th on the list. This is at like 7 in the morning. So I tell dispatch, because I got a load I'm supposed to pick up at Chobani, but I need an empty. They eventually find me an empty at, where'd I go for that empty? Oh, up to Layton. I went up and picked a trailer up at Sam's Club in Layton. So I go up there, I get this trailer, and actually that trailer didn't seem to really have any problems. But of course, that was the empty, so I had to give that away. And I get this trailer that I now have on my back. Well, this trailer, it seemed okay, but then after a day into my trip from Idaho down here to deliver in Turlock, it started throwing all sorts of alarms. And I'm lying. That's not the trailer I have on my back now. So the trailer I picked up in Chobani had kept throwing all these alarms. I kept checking it. It was doing what it was supposed to, the reefer was, but it was throwing all of these codes saying that it wouldn't start. Now the irony is that it kept saying that the starter circuit, it kept giving me the alarm that it wouldn't start, but it was in continuous run. Go figure, right? So I dropped that trailer off today, and the trailer I hook, the reefer won't even start. Now, you'll recall I had a reefer that I was in panic mode in New Mexico because I had to, it just shut down when I already had a -10 load in it. This trailer wouldn't start, so I was like, look, I got to go get a shower over at Love's. They said, well, you're going to have to take this trailer to Carrier up in Lathrop. But first, have them check the battery at Love's. So it took from 7 this morning until 2 o'clock this afternoon to get the battery changed. That seems to have cleared the fault. So RA said I don't have to go up to Carrier. So, and by the way, let me give a shout out to these guys at the Love's / Speedco here in Patterson, California. They got this thing turned around quickly. And here's something weird, but apparently batteries in California for reefers are significantly cheaper than batteries for reefer trailers in New Mexico. Because here's the bill I got from the New Mexico job that I did back on, what was the date on this? The 30th of July. So, what was that, 2 weeks ago? It was $478 to change a battery, to put a new battery in. It took the guy 7/10 of an hour, and they charged $364 just for the battery. So $487, almost $500. Today, they took only a half an hour to get it done, and once they got it in there, of course, and they only charged $164 for the battery, which is exactly $200 cheaper. Like, there's a $200 premium on the battery I got in New Mexico. And so this job was only $268 versus $487. So I don't know if there's anybody in the crack audit department at Prime, but I feel like the charge here in Patterson was reasonable. Still a little high. I mean, I certainly could do it cheaper. But I feel like Prime really got ripped off on that New Mexico job. So I think that with the changes, and I've mentioned this before, with the changes in weather, that we're going to have to go to a regime where we run these reefers in continuous, or they start doing battery changes. They start doing battery testing and changes in like inbound, and they get a dude just roaming around the country with new batteries and changing them out while trailers are sitting still. Because here's the thing, this trailer that wouldn't start, I pulled it out of a door at U.S. Cold Storage. So that trailer was clearly running until they shut it down after they got it unloaded, because it may have been a drop and hook. I'm pretty sure it was. So it came in there running. Now, the only place that I've ever come from when I've delivered to that U.S. Cold Storage in Turlock is Chobani. And those Chobani loads run on continuous. So it could have been that the trailer started up on a cool morning or evening up in Idaho, and then that was the last time it had to start up, and then it got down here, it's been hot, hot coming across Nevada or whatever, and the battery just died even though the reefer was running. I don't know. That's my speculation. But I really feel like they're going to have to start doing things a little bit different, because I'm guessing that Prime does not want to pay, $500. Prime has about 12,000 trailers, I think. Now I don't know how many of those are reefer trailers. I walked by a flatbedder today. I'm like, I bet his battery never caused him problems. I don't know what problems you would have on a flatbed other than the tires, and the air, but I guess there could be something, right? Same with tankers. I don't know what any problems would be other than tires and air, but what do I know? But anyway, with these reefers, I mean, you're risking a lot of money when you got a reefer that doesn't run, and it's as hot as it is, well, anytime. But if you look at the weather across the U.S. this summer, it has been brutally hot everywhere. Like, other than maybe the Northeast and the Upper Peninsula, Michigan and stuff, at some point it's been really, really hot everywhere. And some places like Texas, and I'm not even counting Arizona, because Arizona's hot as crap every summer. It's just insane this summer. But Texas has broken tons and tons of records. And I think it's just crazy that places that are on the water, like down in Florida, Houston, those places can't get cool either because the Gulf temp is so high. It's a different, I know that climate change has been going on for years, but I really feel like we've reached this tipping point when it comes to these reefers. So enough about that. I don't want to go too long here, but I gotta respond to some stuff that I've been seeing online, and a lot of people were talking about the 430 less drivers that Prime has, and what does that mean? And Will over at Freight Skater, on his channel, he did a show where he did clips from the safety meeting where Robert Lowe was talking about the reduced number of drivers. And let me say this: 430 drivers, as somebody pointed out, is about 5% of the driver workforce at Prime. I actually am happy that Prime is reducing capacity, and because it's the law of supply and demand, right? If there's less capacity, then that means there are more loads for the people that are left. Now, having said that, right, I don't know, because I've been like mulling this around in my head for a while, and I'm not sure that Prime hasn't reached this point where they maybe don't want to get any bigger. And the reason I say that is that, when we talk about stuff like trailer maintenance, right? The bigger a company gets, especially when there's centralized control like there is at Prime, it gets harder and harder to manage, right? And like when I was at Knight, for example, every Knight terminal has its own terminal manager. So the dispatchers, the driver managers at that terminal who dispatch the people that are based at that terminal, they work for the terminal manager. So the terminal manager, he controls the shop, he controls the driver managers, he controls the drivers, all out of that terminal. He's responsible for the profitability of that terminal. And so, he's a decision maker, right? And I feel like a lot of authority to act is pushed down the the food chain at a company like Knight. Like, you can't keep getting bigger, and like Knight Swift, let's say, but we'll say Knight could not be as big as they are with only one chain of command, right? Like one silo. And unless you want to start dividing things up and giving people at the local places more authority, you really can't keep growing, because you can't manage it. And I'm not sure that Prime hasn't said, hey, we don't want to go to that dispersed system of authority, so we're going to have to make a decision. Either we stay, either we kind of hold the line where we are and maybe do some addition by subtraction. And I'm not criticizing people who have left the company for whatever reason it was, but there's justification for everything, right? We all know that like right now, drivers have to be on their A game at all times. But I'm not sure that Prime hasn't reached a point where they're like, you know what, we're not going to be able to. I hope that they understand this concept, right? Like, here's an example. When I go to Pittston, I have zero idea who's in charge at that place, right? And the truth is that probably at Pittston, there's a number of people who are in charge of something, right? But they all report to somebody in Springfield. Same thing at Salt Lake City. Like, you go there, it's like, who's in charge? Like, when I would go to a terminal at night, if I had a problem, I could talk to the terminal manager. If I had a problem with how the shop was treating me, or I had a problem with something with facilities or anything, or even I just needed like help on the ground for some problem, I could go to the terminal manager. And the terminal managers weren't, those guys a lot of times were just sitting at a desk like the DMs. They had offices, but a lot of times, just to be accessible, like I'd go in, my terminal manager, this dude named Billy, and Billy, he's a good old boy from Mississippi. He's good people, treated me good. And I would go in, and Billy would just be at one of the desks where the DMs sat, slouched. He always leaned way back and had his hands on the keyboard. Be like, I'd go in there and be like, hey, Billy, what's up? Oh, what's up, dude? How you doing? He was just a good guy. And same thing with other terminal managers. Like Indianapolis, Columbus, wherever I would be, if I needed to kind of escalate something, I could talk to somebody. I don't know who to do that with at Prime. And I don't think that's a great, you can't scale a company much larger than Prime is and have it be a quality product. And that's the real rub. You can't, managing growth is a big deal in any business. And businesses that don't grow right and don't manage it hurt their bottom line, because they hurt their product. And a perfect example, because I like railroads and I'm a Union Pacific stockholder, but when Union Pacific took over, bought out Southern Pacific, they had huge service problems. They had huge service failures. Integrating those systems was a huge problem, and it probably took UP like easily a year to 2 to 3 years to get everything back to the way it was supposed to be. Now, that's a little bit different than what we have going on here, but the point is that when you get to a certain point, right, it starts diluting the gene pool. It starts hurting your product. And I think that Prime could actually make more money by having less drivers, but being able to charge higher rates. And the example I would give is Yellow. Yellow had poor service, poor management, and they charged they were the cheapest LTL carrier. Like, that was their calling card. We haul for less. But the funny thing is, right, like when I worked at MetLife, and people would say, well, I can get insurance from US Home Family, the people that advertise on Fox News and ESPN at night. I can get life insurance cheaper. And I said, you know, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you can't, right? I'm not going to match price. I said it's the same reason that when you go to a Mercedes dealership, they don't spend any time explaining why you should pay more for a Mercedes than you pay for a Chevrolet, right? And maybe Prime needs to get into that situation where they're actually prime, meaning numero uno. In other words, our service is better, our response is better, our customer, experience is better, and that's why we charge 20 cents a mile more than our peers. Because then the company can be more profitable, net profit will be higher, right? We make the same amount of money we always did, but we run less loads. And you don't need as many drivers, but the drivers are also participating in that, hopefully. So, and by the way, there were a lot of comments on Freight Skater's page about, oh, Prime is the next Yellow, and I'm like, come on. I mean, if you wanna bash Prime, first of all, I don't know any of Prime's numbers. Well, I kind of know some of the numbers, right? Prime is a multi-billion-dollar corporation, unless they're lying about everything. And Prime's not going anywhere, right? There are going to be changes. They're going to impact people. But I don't think Prime is going anywhere. But I hope that Prime is in a cycle where they're like, hey, we got to improve what we do. We have these core competencies, but we have to be better at these core competencies than we have been, be better than our peers, and have drivers that we can get to execute that strategy. So anyway, I don't know if I'm right about any of this, but in my head it makes sense. So that's what I'm going to go with right now. But I think that the sky is not falling. But it's like the saying goes, it's a recession when your neighbor loses their job. It's a depression when you lose your job. And who knows? I mean, I know some people that have left Prime. And in some cases, I was kind of shocked that they had their contracts terminated, because I didn't think that what happened was significant, at least to the company, but the company felt like it. So anyway, I got other stuff to talk about, but I don't want to go any longer on this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.